And here we are in number 8, and the last reflection in the current series. And I'd like to start with a very ordinary story. It was Saturday morning, and 2 of us had gone into the town to do the ordinary weekend shopping. As usual, the one thing we had forgotten had to be brought from the other end of the main street. Now, the friend with me kindly looked at me as I thought, oh no, all the way up there again, and said, okay, you stay here with the shopping we've got and I'll go and get it. So I went into the store on the corner, a normal store, but it had, just as you got into the door, a small place for coffee and tea, somewhere to sit for a few minutes. And so I went in and I found myself a place on a crowded Saturday morning in the corner, but facing out through the windows of the store, behind the goods they had for sale, and watching quite casually the people passing up and down. And as I reached for my tea, then my hand was in the sunlight. And suddenly, there was a rainbow in my hand. Yes, a rainbow. I looked in the window and I tried to see what it was that could have acted as a prism to break the sunlight into all these wonderful colours, but I couldn't see it. But it made no difference, because I sat there for some time just realizing I had a rainbow in my hand. And it started, of course, all sorts of thoughts of how important the rainbow has been as a sign of peace and security. In the Jewish Christian tradition, for example, that's become a universal one. The rainbow has appeared throughout our cultures as a very strong symbol for us. The bow in the heavens, the bright colours. And the phrase that came to my mind was I had held the rainbow was that one breaks its white radiance into this many-coloured creation. A symbolic way of saying that the source broke open. There had been white radiance, and now there was the multiplicity, the diversity that we experience in this universe. Of course, our scientists are trying very hard to prove what happened at the time of the Big Bang. You know? Their symbol is that. And we have the collider, the Greek colliders working on the French and Swiss borders or under Chicago, trying to get back to that moment when it all happened. And symbolically, we have been fascinated by that moment over the centuries as human race, and found many different ways of describing it. In the Vedic tradition, for example, it was God, the source, suddenly began to dance, and creation came as a result of the movement, the dance movement of reality. But this was another one. That, whatever it is, which we thought of as white radiance, broke open, and we have this many-coloured, this vastly diverse reality, physical reality we call the universe. And we enjoy the diversity, or at least we recognise the diversity in nature, in animals, and in humanity. And right from the beginning, we have been challenged by the diversity. From the very earliest days of migration as human beings, the meeting and interaction with others, different stages of the unfolding of the evolutionary process. And on we have met the differences in some ways, the differences in the physical characteristics of race, which we put down to our genetic structure. And it's interesting to look at this now and to realize that these two, the genetic structure of these two, are only less than 99% different. We still have a lot to discover about our diversity. We had developed cultural differences as well as physical differences, religious differences in our beliefs and practices, political structures and societies, and so on. And all of them were challenging. The diversity was always a challenge. And now that challenge is even more expansive in an era of rapid mobility, huge progress in the technology of communication, to such an extent the power of diversity, the challenge of diversity, has become so urgent that we must respond to it. We like perhaps to sit and rejoice and enjoy the multiplicity of flowers in our garden. Can we rejoice with an equal amount of sincerity at the different skin colours of the human race, or the different ways of cooking vegetables, or thinking of the source of it all? We have been challenged in most recent times in two ways. And one of them is the production of a photograph which was a composite photograph of the photographs taken by the Hubble telescope, which was produced in 2004 by NASA, which showed us that we are living on a borderless planet, firmly, and that the borders that are claimed by politics, for example, are merely lines on a piece of paper. And some people have tried to concretize the lines by building walls, which seems strange. This planet is a borderless planet, and it really doesn't belong to anyone. It is here for the development and the joy of the space-time journey which each of us makes from life to death on this planet. But nobody can claim it and say, this is mine, or this is ours. The borderless planet. We should all be free. We are physically free to roam everywhere on this planet. Cross the deserts, climb the mountains, sail the seas. We have chained ourselves down into certain areas. Possession. This is mine and you keep out. We have to rethink this completely. The challenge of the borderless planet is the strongest, clearest we have had through the centuries, and it's ours now. Waves of global migration. It takes hours to fly from Europe to Africa, or from Asia to the North, to the Americas. Be realistic. That means stay with the reality. We are one species on this planet, and it is not naturally broken up into sections so that each one can claim this is ours. Okay, now why do we do it? What are we afraid of when we realize that some people are moving around the planet? We've got the beginnings of a global migration. We've had them before, but this one's more intense because of the speed of movement from one place to another, as we mentioned a moment ago. Migration. If we think we can claim a bit of the planet, we can tell other people to keep out. When we realize we can't, we should all be free to move, we have a very different perspective on our life on this planet. Why I am here on this planet for such a short period of time. And everybody else is here too, for a short period of time. Why am I afraid of migration? Why am I afraid of the differences, of the diversity? What am I frightened of losing? Wealth, comfort, importance, ascendancy, values? No. Another reason we have to look seriously at the contemporary situation and the challenge to our thinking is that now we have been told the evolutionary process is in our hands. Now there are many examples in both medical research, for example, mainly in medical research, which make us stop and think, how true is this? Have we come to a point where we can, if not control the evolutionary process, but at least affect its outcome? We've talked before on YouTube, you might like to go back and look at some of it again, when we talked about the discovery of CRISPR, which was a way of locating in the human genome those genes which might carry hereditary diseases, and then develop the technology, Cas9, which was like a pair of molecular scissors, which, having recognized the carrier of the disease, we could cut it out. And this experiment had been tried, and there has been a great deal of controversy about it. And go back and look at that YouTube when we talked about this in more detail. We're frightened of the rapidity of the advances of technology. Have we really come to the point where this picture replaces one that is more familiar? You remember the old master painting of the hand of God creating humanity, creating Adam. And here you have the hand of humanity creating artificial intelligence, robots. Certainly we cannot say the evolution of the human species is totally within our control. But are we moving in that direction? Certainly the challenge is enormous, and therefore the fear is high. The fear is high because we've never really learned how to appreciate and live with the enormous diversity of life on this planet. And how now? We are now being challenged to become global persons, to be able to get free of the chains with which we have bound ourselves. Change of nationalism, culture, and so on. You can look at them. Learning to value and develop the diversity, holding the rainbow in my hands. Learning to live and develop diversity. Respect for humanity. Go back and look at one of the first YouTube reflections we had in this series. People for sale. Claiming our freedom. The chain of hierarchical structures. We've also talked at that in detail. Moving into an area where we share the responsibility and the leadership with each other through networks and round tables rather than through hierarchies. Above all, we have to learn to live, rooted in the very best of our cultural, individual, religious inheritances, the very best, so that then we are free to explore and to interact with our full diversity, to become really people of this globe, global persons. It will not be easy to do this. We have to work with diversity. We've both got diversity in identity diversity and cognitive diversity. We have difference in all the characteristics we mentioned, physical characteristics, for example, but also in our ways of looking at things, our perspective on life. Not all Africans feel the same way. Not all Europeans think the same way. Physical, identity differences, perspective differences. We have to learn to deal with this. We've been very slow to learn how to appreciate and develop our diversity. If we do, the gain will be great. The fullness of life will be finally rooted in freedom and not chained to possession. So, what's the next point? For this month, go and hold a rainbow in your hands and rejoice. It might be helpful just to go through the titles and the different themes that we've used for these 8 reflections. So if you missed one, you might like to go back and find it. We started off with the title, People for Sale, because that had actually happened. Migrants being sold for auction. And it led us into a discussion on human dignity and current abuse of human dignity. Then we moved on to a question, is this for real? And the bewilderment of the little boy who, having seen on television the destruction of the Twin Towers, which was in his neighbourhood, the World Trade Center, couldn't make out whether this was a reality or virtual reality. And we talked about reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, and the ultimate reality. The third one, we had a phrase that everybody leaps to, climate change. Well, of course the climate changes. There are some parts of the world where it changes several times a day. Climate change in nature, in emotion. Go and discover what all that was about. Then for number 4, we looked at the collapse of the hierarchical system, social structure, and the replacement by shared responsibility, shared leadership, roundtables, and networking. From there we went to a question, into the law courts. So, do you plead guilty or not guilty? And this led us into the difference between judgment and compassion, and the role of compassion in our everyday life, and how often we are playing the role of judge in a situation where we have no authority to do it, and we don't even understand its value. Number 6, we looked at what lies beneath the surface. We started with a reflection on the new technology, LIDA, which had helped geologists and archaeologists to discover the cities of the Mayan civilization in Guatemala. Thousands of buildings and structures which had laid hidden under the rainforests. And then we went to look at the hidden structures in our lives, in our own person, our own choices, and so on. And then we came to number 7, the one we just had, where we had the A plus 2 equals PQ questions, etc., the one that looked so much like a link to YouTube, and which had to be translated from Globalish into language we're all more familiar with, where we end up in mystery. We are in an age where both science and religion have led us to recognize that we have to go beyond mind, to all that lies beyond mind, and we can, to become mystics. And this has brought us to number 8, the last one, where we took the symbol of the rainbow to remind us of the enormous diversity that we live with and in on this planet Earth, and the challenges from the borderless planet photograph of reality, and whether evolution is now in our hands or how much of it is controlled by us, to have a look at how we have not fully appreciated the power and the importance of diversity, and how we now must learn to become global people with a universal vision and a universal compassion. And so those have been our themes. They have fed back into other themes. They've opened the way for newer themes. And at each one, of course, we've looked at some simple practice that helps us to make this journey through space-time with a greater awareness of the spiritual journey we're also making. And the first one was just a chance to look at automation in our lives by choosing one simple action that I do automatically without thinking every day. It might be that you come home from work, you drop into an easy chair and reach for a cigarette. Okay, stop. Put it down again. Wait for a moment. Or it may be a cup of tea, or opening your cell phone, or what. If it's an automatic action that you do without stopping and saying to myself, why am I doing this? Then for a month, choose that one and stop each time you reach for it, you start it. It's particularly the cell phone. So many people slip their hands into their pockets, take out the cell phone without a split-second thought as to why they're doing it. Or we learnt a lot from changing an automatic action into a chosen action. Okay. We've often found life so hectic that we need to say, I need to pause for breath. So in our second practice, that's what we did. We trained ourselves to pause for just 5 slow breaths. It took a little practice, 5 slow breaths, before getting up and doing the next thing, after turning off the ignition, getting out of the car, when you lift the lid of your computer, or whatever. Many times during the day, pause for 5 slow breaths. That had wonderful results for some people. The third was the repetition. Repetition, we spoke a lot about the power of repetition. And so to use that power very positively for ourselves, by choosing something to repeat that would be positively effective in our lives. Of course, these are very ancient practices. The japa, the repetition of a word or a phrase. And how we can use, yes, we can use beads, or we could just simply turn a ring on our finger while we're sitting in the bus, the train, while we're waiting for somebody to stop talking, just slowly focusing on the words. Okay? Number 4, we saw a picture of the speed with which people are moving around, especially in our cities. And we decided to bring a little Zen walking into the supermarket. Or wherever you are, where people are rushing and you usually rush with them. Just decide on this small amount of the footpath, or from the bus stop to the shop or whatever, or from getting out of the car to getting in the building, and walking deliberately, slowly. Once or twice a day. Okay. Good ancient spiritual practice, mainly out of the Zen tradition, though they did it in a more stylized way and for much longer. But it has an effect, even if it's only for a few moments, every day. Number 6, we went to a visual practice of repetition, the mandala, where we use a geometric design and let our eyes travel slowly from the edges to the center, and from the center back out again. We talked a little about the mandala tradition and the Dalai Lama's use of this for helping people in today's very hectic and overcrowded life. The media has taught us to be extremely visual. And so for many of us now, a mandala, a visual repetition, slow circular movement, may be more helpful than the repetition of a word. But try it. Then we came to number 7. Seva. Doing what you're doing with attention and without any ego referencing. cutting, cutting, or washing, washing, whatever. Being able to let the ego sit down and not want to take possession of what we do or the results of what we do. Dispossession was the thing we had been talking about. And so on. Now, you've had 7. They're all extremely simple, easy to put into the middle of any life. And if you have practiced them, you have some sense of what helps you most. In which case, drop all the others, choose that one, and now practice it for the next 3 months, by which time you will have forgotten that you're making an effort to practice it. It will have grown into your lifestyle, and it will have begun to have an effect on your choices, on your way of living, on the values you have in life. All the things we talk about. Slow walking in the market, or turning the ring on your finger, or taking 5 deep breaths. That's all it takes. There's one sentence in the Christian Gospel that says, Jesus said, now that you know these things, you'll be happy if you do them. Good, straightforward advice. No complicated yogic asanas, no special classes, no need for special equipment, just your ordinary everyday life. So enjoy yourself and make a difference to your life and therefore to the lives of others around you.